Building the shocks. So much fun. First thing we're going to do is make sure we have paper towels available, because you always need to wipe your hand. You can tune with different weights of shock oil. Included is a 30 weight, and a generous amount at that, and that's what we're going to use. What I've got here is a shock building stand. It's a Team FastEddy shock building stand, and it holds 10th scale, 5th scale, and 8th scale shocks. Gives you plenty of room to work on underneath. When you're emptying your shocks, you can put a little bucket under here, turn them upside down, and let them drain. Great tool. It's available, ask your local hobby shop, or they can be found at TGN distributors, or I believe RPP Hobbies may have them as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill up the shock about 90%. Just go ahead and squeeze the fluid in slowly. I'll hold this up to the camera so you can see how much we're putting in there. About yay much. I'd say about 1/8 of an inch under the lid. We're slow. Now what we want to do is there's air caught down in here. So very, very slowly we're going to push up on the shock shaft. You're going to want to watch the top and make sure that the fluid doesn't come out. You can see it just starting to crown now. So we're going to stop and slowly pull down. And as we do that, let's see if we can capture it on camera here. You can see that air bubbles come out. You can see that at the top, you can see the air bubbles maybe coming out. So we're going to do that one time, let it set, go ahead and fill our other shocks up. And do the same thing. If you don't have a shock stand, you can just do one at a time and hold them in your hand, or you can cut little holes in a cardboard box. Several different ways to do it. But we want to go ahead at this point and bleed the air out of all of them. We're going to do that once. We're going to let them sit for a couple minutes. Let all the air bubbles rise. You can look in there and make sure there's no little micro bubbles. You can actually, with the fluid in there, see the bottom. And we're going to go ahead and do it a second time. What you don't want to do is just pump them, because that'll froth the air up. And it'll take them much, much longer to get the air bubbles out. So we're just going to do this 3 or 4 times just until all the air bubbles are out. So we're going to turn the camera off. We're going to keep working these until there's no more air in them, and we'll be right back to finish. Didn't take that long. 30 weight's not a thick fluid, and the air bubbles will rise out quickly. What we're going to do at this point is go ahead and find your caps, which are on the trees. Again, these are mislabeled. They are an AX8 0035-3, not a -2, but -3. And there are 4 caps. They look just like this. Make sure you cut all your spars off with a hobby knife. I missed one here. So that you don't hurt your fingers on them when you're screwing the cap on and off. Let's add a little bit more fluid to the shocks. We're going to go about 1/8 of an inch from the top. And we're going to grab the little bladders, which are an AX30112, and they look like this. They almost look like contact lenses. You'll see that they have a dome to one side, which is the bottom. We're going to call the dome the bottom, and the side with the hole in it we're going to call the top. The next step, it takes a little bit of a feel. What we're going to do is set this bladder on top of the shock, And as we put it on, we're going to want to eliminate any air that is underneath it. And it's pretty simple, but again, it takes a little bit of a feel to do it properly. I've had other RCs that use this bladder system and it works real well. Go ahead and just lay it on top. Kind of let it find its place in there. I'm going to hold down on the shock. And what we're going to do is kind of push it down into the shock body with one finger, and we're going to curl it up with our other finger, and we're going to just lay it down slowly, and as we do that, it's going to force any additional shock fluid out of the shock. It does get a little bit messy, but you can see it coming out, and sometimes the bladders are going to seat down properly inside the. What I'm doing is I'm holding it down and then lifting the corner up with my finger to let any additional fluid out. And the secret is that you do want there to be no air underneath the little bladder. Looks like I got some fluid on top, which isn't going to kill me, but I'm going to blot that off so that that inside of the bladder is not full of oil. Then we're going to take a cap, set it down over, and screw it on. And then we're going to keep screwing it on hand tight. You're not going to use any tools on this, but screw it down pretty much as tight as you can, hand tight. That's how you bleed the shock. As I'm playing with this one, I think I still have a little bit too much oil in there. I'm going to revisit this. As I push up, it doesn't quite want to hit, it doesn't quite want to bottom out. There's still some pressure in there. So I'm going to take the cap off. And revisit the seal here. And bleed a little bit of the oil out by pushing up on the shock. And then if you pull down on it, it'll hold that seal in while you put the cap back on. So let's screw that on. There we go. Just perfect. Play around with them. There's really not a right way or a wrong way to do it as long as you get the air out. Some people like to put the cap, the little bladder, up inside the cap first and screw it on, which you can do. I prefer to do it this way, but whatever gets the job done. Go ahead and complete the other 3 shocks, and then we're going to install our springs. Wipe everything off, and we're all set. On to step number 9. Step number 9, we're going to need our springs. We're going to need the spring perches, which they have labeled as AX80034-4. They're actually -6. We're going to need our pre-built shock bodies that we used earlier, and then the upper cap rubber bushings. And these are made out of rubber. Pretty simple steps we're going to do here. The first thing we're going to do is to insert the rubber bushings into the top cap. It's pretty straightforward. We're just going to push them through. If you have any trouble getting through, you can spit on them. Use a little bit of lubrication of some sort. Otherwise, just a matter of working them in. They're going to go in like that. You're going to want to make sure that they're not pinched or otherwise not all the way through. You need to make sure that that's what they look like. What we're going to do next is to put the springs on. Pretty straightforward and simple. We're just going to drop them right over the top. They're going to rest on the spring perches here. And then on the bottom, we're going to go ahead and pull the bumper and the spring back to expose the shock shaft, and we're going to set the spring perch on there. And if you take a look, there is a slot in there, and there's also the cone. The cone is going to point towards the bottom of the shock. We're going to slide that up onto the shock end, let go of our spring so that it seats inside. And that's how you do the shocks. Go ahead and repeat that process on the other three. And we're going to move forward to step number 10. So go ahead and open bag C and get all your parts ready for the next step.